Over the past few years, we've seen quite a lot of electric scooters arrive on the scene. But more recently, we're seeing more and more electric bikes turning up. The latest of them is this. This is the Orxa Mantis. It's a performance-oriented electric motorcycle that sits in the ballpark of something like the ultraviolet F77. Today, we're getting a very brief first impression of it, spinning a handful of laps at a go-karting circuit here in Bangalore. One big talking point here is the fact that this is a liquid-cooled motor. The first time we're seeing a liquid-cooled motor on an electric two-wheeler in India. Orxa says the reason it's opted for liquid cooling is to help with packaging. It's what's allowed them to make this a compact and light motor. We're told it weighs 11.5 kilos. Output figures are a fairly healthy 28 horsepower and 93 Newton meters. The issue here though is that these figures don't quite translate into the real world. Despite the motor being liquid-cooled, after just 2 laps on track, we got a high temperature warning on the dash, accompanied by some pretty drastic derating of the motor. By the end of our 5-lap stint, the derating was so severe that this 20 kilowatt Mantis felt no quicker than the 8 kilowatt Obain Roar that I rode just a few weeks ago. This was a little disappointing to say the least, and there's clearly a great deal of work still to be done here before Orxa proceeds with deliveries in April next year. We've been given just 5 laps off a go-karting circuit aboard the Mantis, so about 6 kilometers in total, which is far less than we usually get on a first ride. Which means I can't really give you any idea about long-distance comfort. What I can tell you about is ergonomics. You've got a fairly comfortable and upright riding position that should fit riders of most sizes. It is a little tall, but not overly so. The pillion seat though is so tiny, it seems more ornamental than anything else. As you can probably see in these shots, we didn't push the Mantis too hard in our time with it. That's partly down to the motor derating so severely and partly down to the track still being partially wet from some rain. But also because the chassis package failed to inspire much confidence. With little feedback from the front end, not much sense of what was going on at the contact patches, and a strange judder under hard braking on a number of different bikes at the test. On the topic of battery and range, the Mantis gets an 8.9 kWh battery pack that gives it a claimed IDC range of 221 kilometers, but this is an estimated IDC range by the company because it hasn't yet received certification documents. Once again, we've had a very limited time with the bike today, so we can't really draw any conclusions in terms of range. Perhaps the biggest reason why the Mantis will grab most people's attention is for the way it looks. It's quite a distinctive design with a number of interesting elements across the bike. Areas like the aluminium rear subframe and the storage space on top of the fuel tank are quite neat, though overall appearance may not be to everyone's taste. Build quality is acceptable for the most part, and the Mantis feels reasonably well put together, but there are some rough surface finishes and general coarseness in places. The Mantis gets a color TFT display, and the only real thing you need to know about it is that it takes over 30 seconds to come on once you turn the key on. We're told this will be fixed with a software update in the future. As a new manufacturer attempting to enter a premium space with its very first product, Orxa is already fighting an uphill battle, trying to convince customers to shell out a fairly hefty 3.6 lakh rupees for a bike wearing badges they've never seen before. The fact that this bike feels quite far from ready will only add to that challenge. Had the Mantis been able to deliver on what it promises on paper, it would have made for a fairly interesting motorcycle and provided some much needed competition for the likes of Ultraviolet. As things stand today though, this is a fairly difficult motorcycle to digest, especially at this price point. And it's probably a little too early even for brave early adopters to be looking at this bike.